Folks, if you are aspiring to satisfy your customers, then you are aspiring to mediocrity. And I say that because study after study has shown that satisfied customers defect all the time. They just leave. So if you want to derive competitive advantage from the customer experience you deliver, it is not enough to merely satisfy your customers. You must impress them. You must leave an indelible impression in their minds that is going to cultivate the repurchase and referral behavior that is the lifeblood of any thriving business. And today I'm going to show you exactly how to accomplish that. With every customer interaction, your business wins or loses share. With every interaction, you win or lose share. And I'm talking about mind share, followed by wallet share, followed by market share. At every touch point, you have an opportunity either to strengthen customer loyalty or erode it. And what I would tell you about these companies is that the impression that they leave on their customers does not happen by accident. It is very deliberate, very intentional, and I would submit to you that it is a consequence of them all dipping into the same time-tested set of principles for shaping their interactions with customers. And today, I'm actually going to pull the curtain back on some of those principles and get you to start thinking about how you can apply them within your own business. These are the strategies that I would argue beloved businesses that inspire customer loyalty are using day in and day out to create those great memorable impressions on the people they serve. These principles are grounded in psychology, in cognitive science, and that's very deliberate, and here's why. What great companies recognize is that they're not just in the business of shaping people's experiences, they're in the business of shaping people's memories. And the reason I say that is because it's the memory of those interactions that are going to drive their future repurchase and referral behaviors. And this is the cognitive science around great customer experiences. This notion of how you shape the customer's perceptions, how you sculpt their memories. The 12 principles are really techniques for creating experiences that people don't just enjoy in the moment, but remember fondly long into the future. The very things that foster engagement between a customer and a company are not all that different than the things that foster engagement between an employee and a leader. And because of all of those parallels, the fact of the matter is that the 12 principles can be applied to great effect to the employee audience. Because if you want to create promoters in the marketplace, you have to start by creating promoters in the workplace. And that task falls on your shoulders as leaders, and a great way to accomplish that is to make things as effortless as possible for your teams. And my counsel to you and your teams is merely this: there is nothing stopping you and your staff from embracing the same approach as that Ritz-Carlton hotel manager. And by that, I mean demonstrating exceptional ownership and accountability for every customer need that comes to your attention, recovery or otherwise, and thinking not just about the mechanics, the logistics of the experience you're delivering, but thinking in terms of how can I make my customer feel special? Because that makes all the difference. The other thing that these companies have in common is a shared appreciation for just what the customer experience is. And to speak to that point, because many people think that this term is synonymous with customer service, and I would argue nothing could be further from the truth. And to speak to that point, I want to tell you a story about something called rap rage. I don't know if you've ever heard this term, but if not, I'm going to give you the definition of rap rage from Jeff Bezos, the founder and CEO of Amazon.com. Bezos once said, "Rap rage is, quote, the frustration we humans feel when trying to free a product from a nearly impenetrable package. This is a trigger of rap rage. These clamshell or oyster shell packages, they're called. Very often kids' toys, electronics, LED light bulbs these days come in this kind of package. As you might be aware as a consumer, once you start cutting the side of the package, the edges are razor sharp. But what you might not know is this. Each year in the United States alone, 6,000 people end up in the emergency room with injuries inflicted from rap rage. They're trying so hard to extricate the product from this ridiculous packaging that they actually lacerate their bodies so badly they need to go see an ER physician. Now, scores more suffer minor scrapes and puncture wounds, like this poor soul. You might be familiar with one of those injuries. And then, of course, we can't forget about the masses of children who experience psychological and emotional trauma as they try to wait patiently, watching their mom or dad open up their birthday present or their Christmas gift, all the while witnessing their parents mutilate their bodies in the course of doing so. So I hope you'll agree with me that rap rage is a serious issue for our country. But the reason that I tell this story in this talk is because Amazon.com's response to the phenomenon of rap rage is a great example of a company truly appreciating what the customer experience is and how to actively manage it. And here's how the story goes. In the mid-2000s, Amazon started to get feedback from their customers along the lines of, gee, it was really easy to buy off your website, but boy, it was a bear to open up the package that you sent me. People even started sending Amazon photographs. This is an actual photograph from an Amazon customer sent along with a note that said, these were all the tools I had to use in order to open up the package you sent me. Well, in 2008, Jeff Bezos and his management team hatched their response to the phenomenon of rap rage, and it was called frustration-free packaging. And basically what it meant is that Amazon negotiated with their suppliers, so wherever possible, the supplier removed the product from the clamshell so that Amazon then could take it, put it in a box, and ship it to you. You get it, you use it, you give it to your kids, there's no crying or tears, no blood or lacerations, everybody's a lot happier. And this has become something of a competitive advantage for Amazon because brick and mortar stores, they can't replicate it because they use the clamshell as an anti-shoplifting device. Moreover, it has become yet another compelling proof point around how easy it is to do business with Amazon. What I want you to take away from this story is Amazon's appreciation for the broad spectrum of touch points that comprise their customer experience. They recognize that even the mere act of opening the package, even if subconsciously, will influence people's perceptions about their interaction with Amazon. And so they manage that touch point as deliberately and intentionally as any other. A touch point that many would argue is out of their wheelhouse. Many people would say, hey, Amazon's done once they ship it from their warehouse. Amazon doesn't see it that way, and neither should you. As we go through the rest of today's talk, and as you go back to the office, I encourage you to think broadly about the universe of touch points that comprise your firm's customer experience. Because I would argue that it begins from the earliest stages of pre-sale to the latest stages of post-sale. I'd even say that when you have a customer defect, you hope it doesn't happen, but when it does, that point of defection deserves to be managed as carefully and intentionally as any other touch point in your life cycle. I would argue that customer satisfaction is a one-way ticket to the business graveyard. And the reason I say that is because there have been many studies done that have shown that satisfied customers, they defect, they leave all the time. And so if you're really trying to derive competitive advantage, strategic advantage from the experience that you're delivering to people, it's not enough to merely satisfy them. I'd argue you need to impress them. And I use that word very deliberately because the key here is to leave an indelible impression in people's minds that's really going to cultivate the repurchase and referral behavior that is the lifeblood of any thriving business. And, you know, if I had to characterize it in one other way that I think everybody listening would probably appreciate in terms of why should satisfaction not be your goal, think of it this way. Would you prefer your spouse or your significant other? Would you like them to be satisfied or would you like them to be loyal? You know, big difference there. And that's how I think people need to consider their relationships with customers and employees as well.
Great. Yeah. So I wanted to talk about two key terms that you're using, and two key terms are customer experience and customer service. So what's the difference, John? Aren't they interchangeable?
Yeah, so I would go to the mattresses to argue that those two terms are not synonymous, and I think that any company that actually uses those terms interchangeably is not on the right path. So the difference that I see between them is customer service is really just one part of the broader end-to-end customer experience. The customer experience encompasses every live, print, and digital interaction point that your customers could possibly stumble across when they interact with your organization. And the thing is, those interactions, they could even be before they're a customer. And so that's an example of why customer service is not synonymous with customer experience. The customer experience begins when somebody first hears about your business, be it on a billboard, be it from a friend or a colleague or on a social media post. Whenever those things happen, that's the beginning of the experience. Like that's when they're starting to form impressions about your brand, what you stand for. And so customer service, if you think about it, is really just one small part of the end-to-end experience that spans before people are even customers, all the way through to if they ever actually defect from the company. You know, you hope you never have a customer that leaves, but if they do, I'd suggest that touch point deserves to be managed as deliberately and intentionally as any other in your life cycle. The other thing I would say to really underscore the difference between customer service and customer experience is think of it this way. In many types of businesses, when you need to provide customer service to someone, it can actually indicate that something went wrong with the broader customer experience. So, you know, think of it this way. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I can't wait to call my cable company. I can't wait to call my utility. I can't wait to call my insurance agent. Oftentimes in those types of businesses, when you need to contact them, it's because something didn't go quite as you planned. Maybe your cable company sent you a bill and you don't understand it. You don't understand the charges on it. And so that precipitates the need to contact somebody. And right then and there, you're degrading the quality of the customer experience because nobody likes to invest effort in calling those types of businesses. And so that's the other reason why customer service and customer experience should be viewed as distinct entities, because in many types of organizations, when you have a need for customer service, it means something's already gone wrong. The product wasn't easy to assemble. The bill wasn't easy to understand. The product didn't do what the salesperson said it was going to do. So that's why they're two different entities.
Thank you. So you also in the book use an analogy describing great customer experience as being like a beautifully choreographed performance, complete with an onstage and backstage components. Can you talk more about that?
I like this analogy of the theater experience because I've always thought that a great customer experience is like a beautifully choreographed stage performance. And the reason I say that is because if you think about the reaction that you really want to elicit from customers, you really want them to be in an audience, and at the end of the performance, they rise from their seats, they applaud, they yell encore, you know, they're just ecstatic. And by the time they're done applauding and they leave the theater, they can't wait to tell other people about what they just saw. That's really the reaction that you want to elicit from customers. And if you take that analogy a step further, I would argue that there is an onstage component to the customer experience and there's a backstage component. And that onstage component is pretty much everything that customers can see, feel, hear, touch, or smell when interacting with your business. So it's things like your website, your billing statements, your contracts, the live interactions at a retail store, the telephone service that you get when you need help. That's all the onstage stuff that customers can see. And obviously those things are critically important in creating great impressions on your customers. But there's this second part of the equation, which I call the backstage piece. And that really refers to all of these things that are completely invisible to your customers, to your audience, yet nonetheless exert a very meaningful influence on the quality of the experience that is delivered to them. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by a backstage influence. Think about the theater analogy. The actors and the actresses that you hire, how you select those people is invisible to your audience, but you could easily see how the quality of actors and actresses that you bring on board is going to influence the quality of the performance that they deliver on stage. Well, the same thing is true in business. How you hire and select people and making sure you're getting people that have that customer experience gene, that bring that empathy and customer centricity to their job. If you don't do that effectively, if that process doesn't work right, again, invisible to your customers, but once those people get on stage delivering the experience to your customers, they're going to know if they're dealing with folks that just don't have that customer experience gene. So how you hire and select people, how you measure them and reward them and recognize them. These are all things that your customers will never see, but will necessarily influence the quality of the experience that those actors and actresses are ultimately delivering to them. And I think that the companies that do this well, they recognize the two parts of that equation, and they are very deliberate in how they engineer both the onstage experience as well as the backstage. So I think there are a couple of dynamics at play there. One is many executives are just inherently skeptical that there actually is a tangible return on an investment in creating a better customer experience. I think we'll probably talk about that a little bit later, but that's certainly one impediment is they just think, I'm not going to spend more to, reduce the wait or to hire better people that deliver better service and whatnot, because I'm just not confident that I'm going to get a return on that investment. So I think that's one driver that's at play in some situations. But a second is you do have companies that operate in markets or business verticals where they think they're kind of immune to competition. They might be the 800-pound gorilla in the industry. And as such, they might be thinking to themselves, or they might even say it out loud in the halls of their organization, we're the only game in town. Nobody, they're not going to do business with us. Who are they going to go to? This is a little like I mentioned, your cable company. You never want to call your cable company. I mean, I am stuck with my cable company because I don't have any other alternatives in my neighborhood. I've been with them for 2 decades, and there's probably somebody there that's thinking I'm loyal to them, but I'm not loyal at all. I'm just waiting for a better alternative to come around. And so you have these situations where there are companies that, because it's hard for people to switch providers or to find substitute products, that they take that as a license to be bad to people. I think the banking industry is a good example of this. We all know it's really actually kind of a pain to switch your bank account, right? You need to notify all the people that have the automatic debits and credits. And the financial institutions, they kind of rely on that consumer inertia. And, it means they don't have to deliver a great experience because they know that it's tough for people to move. But here's the catch. The annals of corporate history are littered with the carcasses of companies that thought they had a lock on their market, thought they didn't need to deliver a really exceptional customer experience. And then they either died or became shells of their former selves because that environment is actually ripe for disruption. When you look at an industry where everybody's like, whoa, it's awful to be a customer of those companies. Well, that's when the upstarts kind of look at that and say, hey, there's an opportunity there. And so if you look, for example, at Blockbuster Video, for those on the call who remember Blockbuster Video, Blockbuster was never known for delivering a great customer experience. If any of you were around and used Blockbuster back then, what Blockbuster was known for were late fees. Everybody hated the late fees. And so what happened? Well, Netflix came into the market, and I'd argue that they figured out a better way to skin the cat. They figured out a new platform to use to create a better experience for viewing movies. And by the time Blockbuster realized what was going on, Netflix was already eating their lunch. So the companies that don't pay attention to customer experience for those competitive reasons, I think that they are short-sighted. And I think that it's not a sustainable approach to their business. Yeah. So this was a thorn in my side for a really long time. Even before I started my own company, back when I was a corporate executive, what always bothered me was how I would see top executives and boards of directors would routinely lavish money on all kinds of endeavors that had questionable ROIs. Things like hiring a multi-million-dollar celebrity CEO or embarking on a huge merger or acquisition. These are all things that nobody knows if it's actually going to work out, but yet they go, they plow forward with it. Yet when you ask those same executives or boards of directors to invest in delivering a better customer experience, suddenly they're like, they tighten the purse strings. And it's like, well, we got to sharpen the pencil. We got to make sure we see where every dime is going and exactly how we're going to earn it back. And that always bothered me, because I think it reflects this deep-seated skepticism that many business leaders have, that a customer experience actually delivers something and has an ROI. And so I remember it very vividly. The first year my business that I started in 2009 was up and running. It was Christmas time, and I was just racking my brain saying, how do you persuade people? How do you get them to open their eyes to the possibility that there really is a return to be gained from being better to your customers? And it dawned on me at that moment that you really need to speak with them in the universal business language that they're going to understand. And I determined that that universal language was shareholder value. Because whether you're a public or a private entity, everybody kind of gets the notion of shareholder return and maximizing return for shareholders. And so that was actually the genesis of a study that my firm started doing a little over a decade ago, where we looked at the stock market returns of the companies that excel in customer experience, the ones that earn raves from customers, versus the ones that are awful in customer experience and earn rage from their customers. And actually, I will share here with folks saying this is the centerpiece graphic from the most recent version of that study. So it's got 13 years of data under our belt. And you can see that over those 13 years, if you had actually invested in the top 10 publicly traded companies in customer experience, you would have seen an over 300% return on your money. Those companies outperform the ones that are awful in customer experience, shown here in red, by an over 3-to-1 margin. And the other interesting thing about these results is I think it illustrates not just the benefit, the rewards to be gained by being good to your customers, it also shows the penalty exacted for failing to do so. Because if you look, these companies in red that are underperforming in customer experience, they're not just underperforming the customer experience leaders, they're underperforming the general market, the S&P 500 index. And there's no executive or board of directors out there that is going to be happy knowing that they've charted a path where they are not even going to deliver the market returns to their shareholders. So I think that this is a great way I have found to really open people's eyes to the idea that, gee, the return from a great customer experience, being good to your customers, like, it's not just ethically right, but it's actually good for business. And the question that they should be asking isn't, what is it going to cost us to deliver a better customer experience? The question is really, what is it going to cost us if we don't? Because I think this graphic really shows that that penalty is pretty severe. And it's been shown that customers will move to an alternative provider if they know in advance that they're going to get a much better customer experience. Now, that is not a universal truth, meaning that other provider could be charging 10 times as much. There is obviously a limit. And actually, the studies have quantified this in different industries, how much more people are willing to pay for that better experience. But in some industries, it's as much as 20%. And so, yeah, I would encourage you all to think about your own experiences where, you were just done wrong by a particular business provider and just resolved never to work with them again. And perhaps, you switched and maybe you even paid a little bit more. You went to a restaurant where the entrees cost a little more, or you paid a little more for your auto insurance or whatever it is. But yet in the end, you were happy with that decision because the aggravation of dealing with companies that just, provide a horrible experience to you, that aggravation has a cost in and of itself. And, in your head, that's kind of economically the calculus that you're going through.